Toronto's historic College Park building is ripe for a revival. With the building marking 100 years in 2030, we're taking the opportunity to explore its future potential and the role heritage architecture can play in bringing new life to this landmark and the surrounding neighborhood.
I'm really interested in local history and history of architecture.
So I've worked on a couple of events here, but they've been one-off events, awards ceremonies. Back in the day, it was considered one of the finest acoustic spaces in the city at that time.
Being in the heritage architecture side, I love seeing what used to be and how we use it to this day.
In 1976, I was managing College Park, but I am interested in heritage, and of course the whole building's a heritage feature, but this particular floor is amazing in itself.
We're going to be having a very cool presentation by ERA Principal Scott Weir. Now, Scott and the ERA team are currently working alongside Hariri Bontarani Architects, the urban design and landscape architecture firm Public Work, urban design and planning firm Urban Strategies, to bring a new vision forward that maintains and respects College Park's heritage architecture. So today, Scott will be talking about the history of College Park, how it represented an optimistic vision for Toronto, and the role that the heritage architecture of this space can play within the wider neighborhood.
Right now, I'm going to ask for Scott to come on up.
My name's Scott Weir. I'm a principal at ERA Architects. We're a heritage firm that does a lot of adaptive reuse in the city. And we have a bit of a history with this building. So I wanted to talk to you about what's interesting about it that we've come across, the things that have happened over the years, and kind of kicking off, I guess, a celebration of this site over the next while that is what Morgan was talking about with the upcoming 100th anniversary. About 20 years ago, we were invited along with WZMH Architects to work on the restoration of this floor along with the overhaul of this building. And at that point, the site had this floor itself had been empty for a number of years. I'm going to speak to that in this lecture. But this site was really a turning point and an interesting point for me as a heritage architect. This was one of the first big, interesting projects that I'd worked on when I got to Toronto. So back in 2000, this was a National Historic Site, but it had been derelict for quite some time and needed a little bit of love. Recently, we've been invited with a larger team that Morgan was speaking to look at what the next stages for this building might be. So this site was a purpose-built building. It was intended as a department store and there was a really lofty vision for what this could be. Starting out in the early part of the 20th century, land, like Morgan was saying, land was being assembled to try to create this space. And it was partly a department store, but also partly about transforming Toronto. So you can see where we are is really the center of the city, College and Yonge. So this is really about department stores. It's about adaptive reuse. It's about stewardship, the number of people have engaged with in order to keep this place going. So let's start with the Eatons. So Timothy Eaton opened his store down at Queen and Yonge in the 1860s, massively successful and really defined Toronto through its catalog business. And their flagship retail store was not just, you can see Queen Street is down on the far left and then Yonge Street is along the right. They owned the building on the corner, but they also expanded all the way up to Dundas Street. So what you have now as as the Eaton Center was their warehouse buildings, their manufacturing, whatever it was that they were producing for the city or for the area around the city, for their other department stores, would come out of this location. And as the century progressed, the city developed, money moved north, and they saw this neighborhood up to the north as being where the future might be. And what they were really thinking about with College Street was that College Street might eventually become something like what Bloor Street is now. And if you look at College Street, you see our site on the left. The Goodfellas building is still there. You can see the clock tower behind. Our site was a collection of 3 or 4 story buildings. But they thought that this was going to become the Bloor Street, that the major shops would be here. And every indication was really laying out that was going to happen. If you look to the west, the hospitals were opening there. If you look to the west, there was also the university had opened up. To the east, Morgan was talking about Maple Leaf Gardens, that the process for assembling that was underway. And then to the north was the wealthy neighborhoods. Jarvis Street was still a thing. Rosedale had blossomed relatively recently. So the idea was that they should build their headquarters here. And so here you can see the Godes map from around the time that they were doing the land assembly of these smaller buildings that were all assembled. This really started as an idea around, they were trying to figure out the scale they were going to work with. They brought in a really important architect from Chicago, Daniel Burnham, in 1910, in the early 1900s, to look at what would this store be. And went through a number of schemes with Daniel Burnham. This is one of them, which would have been obviously for this current site. That got blocked by the war effort. World War I hit. A number of staff, 3,000 staff, went to fight in World War I. So the whole Eaton's got behind the war effort, and then once the war was over, it needed some time to kind of recoup. At that point, Lady Eaton, this is Lady Eaton here. At that point, she had lost her husband, who had really been driving things before that, but being a strong woman with a vision, she picked up the reins for developing this site, and had, with her very experienced worldly knowledge of what was happening elsewhere on the planet, decided she was going to move this forward and move it forward with a really strong vision. So the challenge for them at this point, and this is a quote from the Eaton president at the time, the challenge for department stores was to no longer sell just quality goods, but to sell beauty, artistic sense, style, and it was therefore imperative that the store convince customers of the attraction of the decorative arts and changing current trends, either through the architecture or through the displays. So it wasn't just about selling, it was about really selling a lifestyle, selling an experience. And this was the beginnings of shopping as being an experience. So they built this beautiful, innovative building as a result. And in putting this vision together, she really shot high. So she was someone who, around this time, she had bought a place in Florence. She was going back and forth between North America and Europe, seeing the big cities of Europe, and traveling on these beautiful ocean liners, which were the fastest way to get there. So in that process, she came across architects that she wanted to work with. She came across this style paquebot, which was this streamlined modern style that was being used on these floating palaces. It was a stripped-down, modern, contemporary form of architecture that was about being international, about understanding the world, about not being trapped in your own culture. It was about expansiveness and expanding forward and really embracing new experiences. So this architecture that you see around us was really assigning that value to Toronto and bringing that international character and that international experience and worldliness to a city that was somewhat conservative at that point. So here, just maybe backing up, the room on the upper right is a dining room on one of our favorite ocean liners, which was the Ile de France. And the room on the lower right is the Eaton restaurant in Montreal, which still exists. It recently reopened after a renovation. You can go there and have lunch. So please, next time you're in Montreal, look up the 9e. Eaton's Montreal, so while they were doing this expansion in Toronto, they also expanded their Montreal store using an architecture firm, Ross and McDonald, who were at that point one of Canada's most prominent architects based out of Montreal. And this is the store that the 9e was in. Ross and McDonald also designed the Maple Leaf Gardens just up the street, along with a number of other buildings in Toronto. And I should here mention some of these drawings are stolen from my friend and colleague David Winterton, whose book on Frank Darling is coming out at the end of the year, hopefully in time for Christmas, but possibly not. So please look up David's book on Frank Darling. But you can see, so these were the tallest buildings in Toronto at the time. You see the Traders Bank, and then moving up to the banks, and then Royal York. These were massive, skyscraping, really optimistic buildings that were moving higher. Here's what was being designed for Eaton's. This was going to dwarf everything in the British Empire if it was built as decided. So the original vision for Eaton's College Park was this very tall building following the New York skyscraper form of like stepping back, allowing light and air to get to the street while having this massive floor plate and stripping down the exterior. So following the forms of classicism, but stripping down the exterior to really allow the overall bulk of the building and the shape of the building to take precedence. So there were a number of schemes that Ross and McDonald was moving through. They finally landed on this as being the thing that they were going to build. So this was the scheme for Eaton's College Park. So the idea was that this would be a phased construction. They started with the full base along College Street, the full base along Yonge Street, and then a 7-story building that you find yourselves in right now on the corner. So they built this building, ran into some structural issues. There's a river somewhere underneath the western portions of this building, and they also hit the Depression. So started the building and then got this far and built this portion of the extent along Yonge Street. You can see the bases of columns started here, and the intent for a podium to be constructed. We took the liberty of building a little model for this to illustrate. So here you can see what was built in the 1920s, opening in 1930. And here's what was intended. So continuing this podium along, excuse me, that exists on the corner, along with a kind of pop-up section in the middle, and then the tower would have been set way back on to the west in the middle of the block. So what you're seeing here is, there's the base that runs along the street that has the storefronts in it, and then there's a colonnade along the central section of the building, the attic story with the medallions above, and then the stepped back penthouse is the space that you find yourself in here. So if you were to look along this side of the building here, there's blinds that have come down, but these are the windows overlooking College Street behind these white glass windows. So Depression hit, but show must go on. So just launch it, huzzah! This is what we were intending all along, and just opened it. But big fanfare at the opening. The Eatons this catapulted them into celebrity status. Because it wasn't just the opening of a store, it was actually the opening of something that could transform Toronto. The series of spaces, the way that they were handling design, the way that they were planning out how you would use this building was intended to be transformative, and it was. So I'll take you on a little walk through the store as it opened. Looking at the front entrance, this is the entrance that still exists on Yonge Street in the middle. The arch with its rope moldings around it, the lanterns are still there. They've been restored a couple of times along the way. It's a celebration of Canadian materials. The exterior of the building is in Tyndall, thank you, Sean. Tyndall limestone, and with aluminum crusting along the roof. All of this wasn't accidental that they were using Canadian materials. It was really to be a celebration of what Canada was offering, what Canada was all about. So here you see these moldings that are still, or the crustings that are still on the cap of the roof. Inside, a really innovative material that you can see around the room here as well as on the ground floor. This Manel metal was an alloy coming out of Sudbury, a combination of nickel and copper that was, up until this point, was a very industrial metal used for canning, used for situations where you may run into corrosion, and corrosion being an issue. For any of you who know Detroit, the Guardian building with its fantastic screen in the main lobby, that is also Manel metal. So Manel metal was in this case in the late 1920s being experimented with in this building and in a couple of other Art Deco or Art Moderne buildings, where they were trying to embrace what was technologically innovative at the time. And just looking at what was being offered in the building, she was trying to design something for people to do. So it wasn't just about shopping, it was about the shopping experience. You could go for lunch, you could get your hair done, you could go to an art gallery, you could see antiques, you could consult with a designer who would help you with whatever it was that you needed. And all of this was in one spot. And if they didn't have it here, they could send you down to Queen Street and the other store would be able to supply it for you. So it was a one-stop shop, really of forecasting or foreshadowing of what would happen at the Eaton Centre down the road. Coming into the building, you were brought into this arcade on the ground floor. It was a parallel street to the main Yonge Street corridor. The idea was it was this simplified and pared down and luxurious, opulent version of the street outside. Once you were inside, then you were in a controlled experience and something that was elevated and would take you out of your experience of Toronto as a Victorian and kind of Edwardian dour city. You can see here, this is really the intent of that arcade, which still exists it's been segmented at this point, but it still exists down on the ground floor, and it was the first step in transforming your experience once you got into the store. You can see in the original plan for the building, Yonge Street was on the left on this drawing, and College Street is on the bottom. The intent was for two arcades that ran along the edges of the building, and then a long galleria down the center of the building as well. And so this is if the entire building was built out as the tower that had been designed. Here you can see the arcade which exists. So here Yonge Street is along the bottom. And this whole section, which has been subdivided, is actually there's a heritage easement on the materials within the space as well. The Burnham drawing, so this is from 1910. You can see that the intent always was that there would be some fantastic spaces within the building. So for the first building, they were really exploring this grand classical architecture. Here it is the Ross and MacDonald version in the 1920s. And then Lady Eaton took it and brought it through her designer, Renée Serrat, who worked in the building, and brought in this kind of French style paquebot language, pared it down, made it more machine age, brought in the Manel metal, and made it quite slick. So within the store, this main street would have had these vitrines. There's 4 of them still scattered around the building that I'd like to see come back to the arcade. But they marched down the arcade from north to south, and they would have featured whatever you could find elsewhere in the store. main stairs that took you up, then directed you into the floor areas. So this was the ground floor space. The ground floor had the thrift house. So if you didn't have any money but still wanted to shop at Eaton's, you could go to the thrift house and it would tell you, well, the thing that you can afford is on the third floor at the back. So that's the thrift house there. The furniture was on the ground floor as well. At the far south was the lighting department, which I think is now the gym. And then at the far west was the specialty shops that would have tied into more of the clothing retail that happened at Queen Street. Here, the more specialty items would have been brought to College Street. So moving up in the store, then you're on the second floor. The second floor was the beauty salon, the art gallery. And the art gallery would do exhibitions. You could buy art. You could have it placed within your house. You could go. The idea was that you would be able to come to this place for an experience, or come to this place as a one-stop shop to fit out your house. Third floor was Oriental rugs. These were being brought in from around the world, and in some cases were new, in some cases were antique. Then on the fourth and fifth floors, there was another house. This was the ideal home, where you could see the more designer features. And then above that were the period rooms. So in this case, they had a couple of rooms from, there was one from Hampton Court Palace. There were others from Cotswold houses. So they had bought these full rooms, brought them over to Eaton's, and then they mixed those rooms with others that were built by their carpenters in-house. So you could go to see, here's what Hampton Court Palace had, and actually we can build you something that is relatively similar for a fraction of the price. And within it, you can see there are antiques for sale, and they're being brought in from Europe, along with new pieces that were being made at Eaton's. So there was really a mix of these pieces that designers could take you through, and then you'd approximate this for yourself in Toronto. Seventh floor. This is where we are now. So a guy named Jacques Carlu was behind the Paquet-Beau style. He was an architect who had really achieved a lot of fame in 1919. He had won the Prix de Rome, was teaching at the University MIT, and also was Parisian. So he was going back and forth, looking at French architecture, designing contemporary buildings, designing these ocean liners that were the fastest, most modern, most contemporary, interesting things. And Lady Eaton came across him and brought him in to do the 9th floor in Montreal and the 7th floor in Toronto. And this quote I love of his, just being about, it's about the experience, about there being no dividing line between how you live and the arts. So here's Jacques Carlu. So he had a lot of work going on once he had won the Prix de Rome. A number of his designs we've been able to dig up. This is of the design for the Fox building in New York. This is a really spectacular restaurant that he designed for the Sherry Netherland Hotel. And you can see just the contemporary feel of this space. And you can imagine being in that space overlooking New York inside these glass walls. This was a built store that he did, the Stewart and Company store on Fifth Avenue. This is now the site, unfortunately, of Trump Tower. So this magnificent building was taken down at the time of that construction. But this would probably have been something that Lady Eaton would have come across. This was opened a few years before Eaton's opened, and it featured one full floor of Jacques Carlu's work. And it was opulent, it was understated, it was modern, and had this sense of space that was really unusual, particularly unusual if you're coming from a place like Toronto. So that was the Stewart lobby. Here you can see the lobby that we have in Toronto. Really a remarkable set of moves in order to make this space work. looking at this, the way the lines are working, the way the space flows, there's the bands of light along the ceiling. There's the expression of the sprinkler heads in that ceiling moldings. This was about machine age. It was about speed and referencing this kind of international experience. So just looking at the plan now, you're in the round room, which is on the lower right. There's the L-shaped lobby. This would have potentially continued around the entire square of the block, this space, if the whole building had been built out. What you can see on the left is the apartment building. And then across the hall from us, as Morgan was saying, is the auditorium. And I would encourage you, please go take a look at that. So the way this space is organized, the noise that here in the middle is the fountain, so the bubbling of water. And then from the top, that black disc that you can see there is vitrolite. The center of it was originally a Muzak speaker. So the top was music, the bottom was water, and then everything sort of ripples out from there. So all of these rings that you see in the ceiling we're really expressing this kind of water and music through light. The panels around the edge of the room. So if we look these 4 quadrants, you can see behind me. But these 4 panels were painted by Jacques Carlu's wife, Natasha Carlu, or Anne Carlu, depending on how she was signing. But they were depicting life in Canada. So there was life in the village, life by the sea, life in the prairies, and life in the woodlands, I think. And then the columns spaced between them. This was really creating a kind of temple space. So you're indoors, but you're outdoors, and it's this ideal circle in a square piece. And so I love this space. We've had the pleasure of working on this during the restoration, and did a little bit of analysis and found this remarkable set of proportions. So this is really designed around harmonic proportions, and the more analysis that you do, the more you find these relationships. Proportionality was important to his thinking about how pieces came together, and the reason for this was really that if you look at a face, the construction of a face, if you look at the structure of a flower, these proportions exist in harmony in nature. And so if you pull them into a space, the idea was that you would find beauty through this harmony. And I think in here that is supporting that argument. Originally, in all these niches where you see the flowers, there had been sculptures by Denis Gallin. They disappeared at some point about 30 or 40 years ago. And then, so there were pieces that were designed by others. There were pieces that were designed by Jacques Carlu. There were artworks by his wife and by people that he brought in. And then there were also the elements that were used in the space. So he actually didn't design this glassware, but he was instrumental in finding it. So he assembled everything from the uniforms of the waitresses to the furniture to the glassware, so that when you came here, you weren't in Toronto anymore. You were somewhere else. You were in Paris. And this space really was one of those pieces of the building that elevated the experience of Toronto and elevated the experience of what it was to be here and to socialize here. So across the hall, we have the auditorium. These are some of Carlu's original sketches for the space. And you can see his intent behind the way art is portrayed on the walls, the way that pieces flow into each other, how they fold over and kind of lock onto each other, and the development of some of his ideas in putting this together. It's an acoustically perfect space. So this was the favorite recording place for Glenn Gould, amongst others. It was a significant place for Toronto with, as Morgan was saying, many performances happening here. When an act would come through Toronto, this was one of the ideal places that you would want to play. And then mixed with that was fashion shows and lectures by interior designers who would then direct your attention. So you might come for a performance, but there would also be maybe a show, and you could actually find that downstairs. So if you go to the specialty shops, then you could go buy something. And if, in case you forgot, there were these vitrines in the lobby that would remind you that you could be here, you could be shopping, you could be buying something right now. So it all directed back together to make this experience, and became a renowned key pivotal part of Toronto's life as a result. So the fallout from that was that the neighborhood really responded to this as being an anchor in the neighborhood. This is the Westbury Hotel that was the first luxury hotel to be built in Toronto after the 1920s. So after, I believe, or after the Second World War. And this was built across the road. It's now, I think, thank you, Marriott, yes. And then a lot of density of mid-century modern architecture was being built. This is across the road still. Along with supper clubs, this became a neighborhood where you would go, maybe you'd go for a performance, maybe you'd go to the Odeon for a supper and a movie, or maybe you just go to one of the supper clubs in the neighborhood. But it became the anchor for cultural life in the city. It's not really an error, or it's not an accident that this was where the gay village started out, with all these supper clubs and all these clubs that had opened up in the neighborhood, and that still obviously is still here. The Eaton Centre then, so this was actually quite a success despite the fact that this had not been built out to the level that it could have been. It was a germ of an idea that they wanted to take forward. And so they still wanted to do this mammoth construction, and so took it back to Queen and Yonge, and took those ideas that they were developing of a shopping experience, of a series of events that you might go through, a way to spend your winter indoors and comfortable. And they took the ideas of Burnham that you can see from the 1910 designs for College Street, and then you see this being explored through the Eaton Centre. The Eaton Centre was massively successful. Of course, with the opening of the Eaton Centre, the College Park needed to close. So it was sold to developers. There was some changes done to the building. So the west wing that you see here that extended along College Street, and seen here from Bay and College, that had the specialty shops, was taken down, and the rest of the building was repurposed. So there had been a plan at one point to build the tallest building in the world. This was a 140-story tower that was planned for this site. That would have obviously taken over the entire block. That didn't go anywhere. That was 1971. And then there was a competition for what the next use of the site might be. And this was a competition entry by Arthur Erickson for 1974. But the redesign of the site was won by a joint venture, which was Alward and Gowanlock, A.M. Ingleson, Joseph Bogdan, and WZMH. And that produced a number of things on the site. So it was a redevelopment of the entire site. It was the construction of the apartment building that exists at the southern end of the site, and the adaptive reuse of College Park. So here's the apartments building that still exists. And then the adaptive reuse of College Park, which won a number of heritage awards at the time. This was a significant moment for heritage conservation. This was back in the 70s, late 70s, I believe. Really an early time for thinking about repurposing of spaces and repurposing of interesting design, which at that point would have probably led more to demolition. The areas between the ground floor and the 7th floor, where we are now, were gutted at that point, and a number of other reuses put in. The courts were put in. There was a TD data center, and then the 7th floor. So the 7th floor by the 70s was still relatively intact, had kind of languished. You can see, so during this repurposing of the building, the intent was, and the agreement was with the developer, that the 7th floor would be restored. But the developer at that point reneged on it, and started to do demolition. And a community activist group called Save the 7th Floor worked at trying to prevent the demolition of this suite of rooms. and were quite successful. Took this issue to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled in their favor and put a stop work order on the site. And at that point, the developer said, well, if I can't do what I want to do with this space, then I'm just going to leave it. So it sat then and basically rotted for about 25 years. So this is what it looked like in 2001. 2001, we were invited to work with a team of people, a team of consultants, along with WMH architects, to look at how are we going to repurpose this floor and then some other changes in the building. And they started this project off with an intent and not really a clear idea of where this might go, but hoping that they'd be able to pull this together with the help of a partner. At that point, Mark Robert and Jeff Roik came on board, who were event planners and had backgrounds in real estate. Mark Robert is here. I think he's sitting right over there. And they were able to bring another $11 million to the table, which just made all the difference in terms of being able to turn this into something that was refined, that had a really high level of restoration. And you can see that at that point, a number of pieces were still here. These decorative elements had been stripped off the walls with the intent of bringing them to architectural antique stores or whatever. The spaces were relatively intact. This is a series of photographs that I would urge you to take a look at by Brent Wagler that are now in the cabinets along this foyer, the full series. But you can see the room that we're in right now is relatively intact, just a little rough. Fortunately, this room was used as the storage for the rest of the floor that was being demolished. So things were being brought here rather than this room being stripped out first. So fortunately, we still have the murals and so on, but all of the furniture, the fixtures, and so on were being brought here and dumped here. During the course of the restoration, there were a number of different layers to this restoration, one of which was, obviously, there's a lot of plaster work that really defines the spaces and the curves and so on. And to get this kind of plaster repair, plasterers were being brought in from Europe. So there was this team of Romanian plaster conservators who came in, and they liked opera. So they liked singing opera. So you knew where the plasterers were in the building. This is 40,000 square feet of space. You knew where they were in the building because you could hear off in the distance there was some opera happening that may or may not be on key. There was conservation of the murals. The murals had decades and decades of cigarette smoke, and then someone had painted over a layer of varnish on top of that, and then decades and decades of cigarette smoke. So they needed a lot of work. That corner back there, just to the left of the doors, had a really unfortunate fire hose cabinet installed. But we found that the City of Toronto Archives actually had the panel rolled up under someone's desk that was supposed to go in this location. So we were actually able to get a permanent loan from the City of Toronto for the piece of mural that is on that back wall. And go take a look when we're done here. The auditorium went through the same level of conservation. We had to think about, this was right next to the apartment building. So on one side of the wall, you had a boisterous crowd of drunken revelers. On the other side, you had the apartment building. So there were a number of soundproofing efforts that were put in. This is a floating slab floor that sits on neoprene pucks. So as the vibrations get themselves into the concrete, they don't travel off into the structure. Take a look at this when you're there. It's in the auditorium. It's a cartouche by Denis Gallin. Again, lots of layers of paint and so on removed to restore the plasterwork. So here you can see it set up with chairs for an event, and then this obviously turns into a party space as well. This has been used quite a bit. So this is Handmaid's Tale. I'm not sure what it says that dystopian visions like to find their ways to the Carlu, but they do. It's also used in a number of period dramas. And the process of restoration, the lights had not been on since the 70s. And the light was such an important part of the design in this space. when the lights finally came on in 2003 or whenever it was really remarkable to see this vision of this kind of line work and how the Art Moderne qualities were being expressed through light. So here it is before, and here's the space as it is now. One quick deep dive into heritage restoration. So the fountain was a really interesting component that I was really delighted when Mark and Jeff and GWL wanted to restore it. So you can see it here, and obviously working in the room. By the 1970s, it had been very badly damaged and it didn't work anymore, so it had become a salad bar. And then, with the salad bar removed, this was really what was remaining. And there's, looking at this, it's damaged, but there's enough here to know what the intent was. So you can see, the form, you can see how all the pieces went together. There was probably a light in there somewhere, but you can't really understand from this, how is the thing supposed to work? So we dug into doing research, trying to figure out, how would the jets work? How would the nozzles? And just digging through the Eaton archives, finding photos that told us, what were the pieces that were missing and how are they supposed to work together? So you have there's a manifold that brings the water up to the top. Just to point out, there's a pool light down in the bottom, and someone would have had to, so this is where all the water collects, someone would have had to open that and change a bulb and close it again afterward with all of this stuff around it. So here's the chassis that would hold all the glass pieces, the glass bits. So these were curved glass panels that went around the fountain, and take a look afterward. You can see some of them are slightly lighter and some of them are slightly darker. The original ones are slightly different color than the glass that we were able to match, but fairly close. Here it is put all together before we started restoration with a light on top. We were testing out different ways to make the lighting work, like where should the lighting sit? How could we do this in a way that would be not quite as life-threatening? So we designed a light fixture that you could unscrew, take out, and then put back in without it being in a wet environment. There's a deck on top that was fortunately all still there. These nozzles that shoot the water, and then this ziggurat of pieces on top. And presumably originally this would have been glass. It would have been individual pieces, probably broke relatively often. So we designed the new one out of its acrylic, all one piece, lifts out, change the light bulb, put it back. This was really inspired by the fountain that was on the Ile-de-France. So, Lady Eaton's reference. And here you see it going back together, under assembly, and then as it's finished with the pool around it. So this opened in 2004. There was a good amount of press around it and some awards. What had been for people like me, I came to the city in 2000. I didn't experience this back when it was the Eaton Auditorium. This was really a revelation for me to see how it would impact the cultural life of the city. So we're now at another inflection point, and we've been studying the building like mad to try to understand what were the visions over the years, what could be next, what is it not doing for the neighborhood that it was really intended to do originally. So a couple guys in my office, Zach and Tupac, devised this way of being able to reference the building. So using a drone, scanned the entire building in 3D, and now you can hop between these dots to do really close-up examination of stonework on the exterior to see how the building's been moving and changing and what we need to fix. There is this fantastic arcade on the ground floor that is still relatively intact, partitioned off into closets and into change rooms and so on. There's a hope that we could bring this back with this beautiful opulence of stonework. And then how it hits the street. This was really intended to be an anchor in the neighborhood and could be again.
So that's it. That concludes today's discussion. Please make sure to visit collegepark100.com for future events and updates.